they have been misreading the Israeli tolerance for threat ever since October the 7th, which is that they have assumed that the rules of the game that they have been using remained in place, that they could effectively have their proxies launch kind of harassing attacks, and that the Israelis would tolerate that. And that has been shown not to be true.
Explosions sounded in Tehran early this morning as Israel carried out airstrikes on military targets. I say military targets, this is what Israel said it's done. They don't appear to have targeted Iran's leadership, nuclear or oil sites. Israel have described the measures as proportionate. The Israeli military have already said that if Iran was to begin a new, further round of escalation, it would be obligated to retaliate. Matthew Savill is Director of Military Sciences at the Royal United Services Institute. Matthew, good morning.
Good morning.
We knew that Israel were going to retaliate in some form. The shape it's taken, is it what you were expecting?
I mean, I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting, but what it does seem to be designed based on the very limited information we have, a conventional strike that is intended to send a message to Iran about Israel's conventional superiority, but not escalate further by broadening the target set. So the Israeli statement that they have hit largely air defense and missile production sites both demonstrates that the Israelis can hit what they want with greater effect than the Iranians, but also reduces the threat back to Israel in terms of Iranian capabilities that they would use in any such further attack.
The caution that has to be planned there. I mean, the aim then, I guess, from Israel, and well, particularly the aim from the US and the UK, was to get Israel to behave in a way that would restore deterrence that doesn't prompt escalation. Do you think that's what Israel's managed to have done?
The honest answer is I don't know right now, because we don't really have any good information on what's going on, although we have got the Israeli statement. The Iranians are already sort of trying to play it down and releasing pictures of sunbreak over Tehran. What they don't seem to have done, based on what we've seen so far, is, as you said, hit nuclear facilities or any major leadership targets, nor, it looks, any significant oil production or economic targets. So this is being phrased as proportionate and targeting the Iranian military and probably the IRGC and its aerospace forces.
Some Iranian media at this stage, and obviously we do, as you've done already, have to caveat this with what we know at this point, have been sort of downplaying the impact. Does that suggest to you that from Iran's perspective, that might not mean there's a further retaliation?
Based on this round of strikes, potentially, particularly given that they're trying to play it down, there's a question of whether or not hitting targets in and around Tehran is trying to thread the eye of the needle in terms of something that is high profile enough that it can't be ignored, that it's sending a message by not hitting something that's out in the middle of the desert. The Iranian population can see that the government couldn't defend against this, but it's not so severe a blow that the government has to immediately jump up and down and threaten high-profile retaliation. The way that they're initially talking about this, they're certainly not looking to up the ante.
What have we actually learned from, let's say, the beginning of this month with the ballistic missiles fired by Iran and now the response from Israel? What have we learnt about Iran or its proxies' military capability now if they were to retaliate?
I think there's a couple of things. The first is, if you like, about how the Iranians are reading the Israelis, and this is a story that goes back over a year. I think they have been misreading the Israeli tolerance for threat ever since October the 7th, which is that they have assumed that the rules of the game that they have been using remained in place, that they could effectively have their proxies launch kind of harassing attacks, and that the Israelis would tolerate that. And that has been shown not to be true. The other thing is that the ballistic missile threat from Iran is significant. And I think actually the re-evaluation of the attack at the start of the month shows that more got through than we originally suspected, and that's why the US deployed an additional air defense battery. So I don't think it's a case of being blasé about Iranian ballistic missile capabilities. They have quite a lot in terms of volume and some improving capabilities. But what we'll probably see after this round of strikes is that Israeli conventional superiority is still significant.
Yeah. To what extent is Israel being propped up by support militarily from the US? Because the US were not involved in this retaliation, but have said they would, of course, help Israel defend themselves. To what extent is that relationship reliant on each other? Because ultimately, the politics plays into this so heavily.
There's an enormous, if you like, industrial intelligence and background relationship, which I wouldn't know if I don't know if I'd use the phrase propped up, but the Israelis benefit enormously from that. So lots of Israeli air defense systems, everything from Iron Dome up to some of the more sophisticated, have either been developed by the US or are actually funded in a foreign military sales or foreign military funding sense. Lots of the interceptors, for example, are funded by them. What we might draw in terms of deployed the high altitude system is that it might be that the Israelis are running low of some of their ballistic missile interception systems. So there is a relationship there that goes beyond the sharing of intelligence and, if you like, the political cover that the US provides.
Matthew, thank you so much. Matthew Savill, the Director of Military Sciences at the Royal United Services Institute, on the news that we've been waking up to today. Explosions in Tehran as Israel carried out airstrikes on Iran and what they've described as military targets. Matthew has made clear at this point we are just hearing statements from Israel, from associated parties. It is quite difficult to get absolute clarity on the scale and the impact of those strikes, but we're going to try and get that for you across the morning.
And one thing we have heard is the Prime Minister speaking in Samoa in the last few minutes. He says Iran should not respond to the Israeli strikes. He's been speaking at the press conference at the end of the meeting of the Commonwealth Heads of Government. So Keir Starmer says, "I am clear that Israel has the right to defend itself against Iranian aggression, and I am equally clear that we need to avoid further regional escalation and urge all sides to show restraint. Iran should not respond. We will continue to work with allies to de-escalate the situation across the region."
We know that they have avoided hitting Iranian nuclear facilities and oil refinery, which was a big question. I know the United States has been discouraging that kind of attack, fearing a major escalation. So this has been a calibrated attack, and the ball is in Iran's court just to see how they will respond. I think that the expectation in Tel Aviv is that Iran would be too fearful to respond to the attack, and that Israel has achieved its objective. But it does really open up a Pandora's box. We have to wait and see how the Iranians respond. At the moment, they are downplaying the extent of damage. They are talking up their anti-air defense system, saying it was successful in deterring and aborting the attack. But it really remains to be seen how the authorities in Iran feel about the extent of the damage and whether they feel the need and the urgency to respond yet again with another round of missiles towards Israel. I suspect that the Iranian authorities would refrain from doing so because it's really not in their interest to go down the path of escalation. I think there would be some differences in the way the new president would respond to Israel. I think under Kamala Harris presidency, we are likely to see more of a robust U.S. response to Israel, and on the Trump presidency, basically a carte blanche response to Israel. So I think from the Israeli point of view, they would favor to have Trump in office because it just gives them the freedom to act the way they wish. So we know there is internal pressure within Iran for more aggressive response to Israel. And if they get to have their say, then the whole region can really explode. The whole region can go down a very, very fiery path because the United States will be embroiled in that kind of escalation. The United States has bases in the region. The United States has troops based in Israel now. If any of the U.S. soldiers are hurt or suffer casualties, that is going to really embroil the United States in the conflict directly. And that's a very dangerous turn.